Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So before I get started, I want to shout out one of my subscribers, John Pro, for recommending that I watch 60 Minutes tonight. They interviewed Betty Shelby. She's the officer who's accused of killing Terence Crutcher in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now I'm going to provide my feedback, share my thoughts about the interview and provide my assessment of the situation based on what I saw tonight. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this case, an African American man by the name of Terence Crutcher was stopped by the police. And during his interaction with the police, this brother had his hands up. He was backing away from the police towards his vehicle. When he approached the driver's side of the vehicle, towards the window of the vehicle, Officer Betty Shelby fired and killed him. Now, this whole event was captured on videotape. It was captured because there was a police helicopter above the entire scene, videotaping the event as it unfolded. And, so we could see all this information that I just provided, it was live on video. And while this was going on, the police officer in the helicopter described Terence Crutcher as a bad dude, basically suggesting that he's dangerous and all that kind of stuff. So during tonight's interview, and before I go into the detail about the interview, I'll just say this. Just after watching the show, I think, unfortunately, that it is very unlikely that this woman, Shelby, will be convicted of anything. I would be surprised if she is convicted of manslaughter. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, she said all the magic words. She said that she thought he was reaching for a gun. She said that she feared for her safety, and she did what was necessary to protect herself. She fired upon him. Now, it turns out he didn't have any weapon. There was no weapon on the scene, no weapon in the car. He didn't have a gun in his hand or anything. But she said all the magic words, to create a reasonable doubt, to raise the question about whether or not her actions were reasonable, whether she had a reasonable belief that this man was reaching for a weapon. And the thing that makes this case very troubling is the fact that this brother had his hands in the air most of the time, and that the window was rolled all the way up, so he couldn't possibly be reaching for any kind of weapon. But here we have another dead black man, and it's unlikely that there will be justice. So not only is she saying all the magic words that play well with juries and that are consistent with the law, there are racial dimensions to this case that may affect the outcome of the case. First of all, you have a black man, a big black man, a man that somebody could describe as intimidating. And you had this white woman. And this white woman, not only did she say the right words, this woman comes across as being a good witness. She comes across as if people could believe that she's credible. People could get the impression that what she's saying is accurate. Now, and also she's real sympathetic because during this interview, she started to cry and all that kind of stuff. So it's easy for people to sympathize with her, especially given the fact that she's a police officer, she's a white police officer, and she's a woman. So I think that a lot of that will play in her favor when the case goes to trial. People will be inclined to believe her, unfortunately, and this woman will get away with manslaughter. There will probably be no justice in this case, and nothing will come about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if she continued to be on the force. And it's very unfortunate. And another thing that has to be pointed out is this. We know how these cases go. One of the first things that they do is they demonize the victim. And there's a basis to demonize this victim. They're going to talk about how he had PCP in his system at the time of the shooting. They're going to talk about how there was PCP in the car. That's going to hurt the case, even though it shouldn't even really matter, but it's going to have an impact on the case because this woman said she repeatedly told him to stop and to do this and to do that, and he refused to comply with her instructions. And we know about PCP. PCP is a mind-altering drug that destroys people's perceptions of reality and all that kind of stuff. The fact that he had this drug in his system is going to play into this reasonable doubt, and it's going to make it likely that this woman will get off. And not only that, this man at one point was convicted of selling crack cocaine. That is not going to help him. And I don't know if that would get in if the case goes to trial. You know, I'm sure the prosecution would fight something like that. But it's likely that it may get in. You know, it's possible that may get in, you know, or it may not get directly in, but still that story is out there in the media, and I doubt that potential jurors are not going to hear about that fact, you know, about this past conviction. And I think that's going to hurt the case. It's going to make it harder to convict this woman of manslaughter. Because here you have somebody that's a drug addict and also somebody who has been convicted of selling drugs. That person's credibility is going to be weighed, you know, whether rightfully or wrongfully, against this officer's credibility. You know, an officer who's never had to fire her gun in the line of duty until this particular incident. So I think that this is a very hard case. It's going to be a hard case to prosecute, unfortunately. And it's just going to be another disappointing situation. You know, I think that she probably should be convicted of manslaughter, just based on what I've seen, you know, based on the video. You know, the brother was complying, you know, to a degree. You know, he did not do everything that they told him to do, obviously, but he had his hands up, so he did not pose any kind of threat. The window was rolled up, so he couldn't possibly be reaching for a gun in the car. And I just think that this is a case of somebody having an implicit bias against African Americans. I mean, somebody does not have to be a member of the KKK. Somebody that does not have to be a Nazi. Someone does not have to use the N-word in order to have racist perceptions of black people. You know, the fact that this is a black man. You know, some people have these inherent biases. They view black men as a whole as dangerous, and they're more likely than not to use force against black men. Because I know damn well this man was not a black man. If he was a white man, if he was a white teenage boy or a white girl or a white woman or an Asian man or an Asian woman, I doubt that this brother would have been shot and killed. And a lot of the people in the community reflect that same sentiment. They interviewed a pastor in the community, and he expressed similar views. So I don't know, like, the makeup of African Americans in Tulsa. You know, I don't know how many African Americans will be on the jury, but all it takes is a couple of holdouts to get a mistrial. So who knows what's going to happen? I would be surprised if this woman is convicted, unfortunately. And I hate that that's the case, but that's what it looks like from what I've seen so far. And before I close out this video, I just want to mention one other thing, and that's this: the role of these pastors. Now, the police department, what they did, and the city officials, they met with pastors and other community people. They showed them the videotape ahead of time. And basically what they did is they tried to use these people to quell any potential uprising or any kind of protest that would turn violent and all that kind of stuff. And they were effective, you know, because they prevented, you know, something from popping off. You know, and I think part of it was given the fact that the police put out the videotape so that people could see it, so that there was some degree of transparency. and then they use these pastors to pacify the people and to prevent them from engaging in violence and all that kind of stuff. And while I can understand that, the need to prevent violence and all that kind of stuff, I mean, we can't let these so-called pastors and stuff pacify us into passivity, into being in a state where we are not protesting with the same kind of militancy that we should have protested with, or expressed the same kind of anger that we should have expressed. It's like they use these pastors to quell the people, to calm the people, to control the people. So they preach to them about being peaceful and being nonviolent and loving their neighbor and all that kind of stuff. And they give them some indication of, anger and frustration, but they control that anger and frustration, and they control the people. So that's the situation. I mean, the people didn't uprise or anything. And I think part of it was, the fact that you had these pastors, the fact that you did have the city make some kind of efforts in terms of releasing the video and bringing charges. And I think that the charges are designed just to quell the people, to give these people a window show, to give these people some kind of impression that there may be some kind of justice, just to calm people down. And I think that eventually it's going to be hard to contain that, to contain the people, especially when this woman gets away with this, when she's found not guilty. I want to see how the city handles it at that point. Man, I mean, it's just like a terrible situation, man. It's just unfortunate. So those are my thoughts. Tell me what you thought. Did you see the episode of 60 Minutes tonight? What did you think about the interview? Please rate, comment, subscribe, and donate. Peace.